welcome to the new rebrand. And welcome back to the World War II Mysteries and Obscurities Iceberg. Did you miss me? Because I missed all of you. Really, I missed making these videos. I missed sitting down and talking and not having to spend an entire week of my time editing an hour-long video. It's so nice. Not to mention, I actually really enjoy making these kinds of videos. Before we jump into today's part of the iceberg, I want to quickly address the rebrand and go over why it is that I decided to do it. The name that I was using, which was Zaber, was just kind of a placeholder. It was a stupid teen brain idea to go with a name that I thought sounded so cool and nothing more. I never realized how, in all honesty, it just never suited me. Amadeus was a name that I had been using on Discord for nearly the entire time I had it. So I decided that it was only reasonable that I make it my channel name as well, just to not confuse people. And as well, I will be making the rebrand to possibly my cosplay account, which I decided now would be a great time to go ahead and talk about because it exists. Anyways, back to the video. So we're starting off with something that it's really wholesome. It's really cute. So bear with me. Pun intended. Wojtek, yes, it is pronounced Wojtek and not Wojak or Wojak. Anyway, it's a Syrian bear who, as a young cub, would be pretty much adopted by the Polish II Corps soldiers who had been evacuated from the Soviet Union. In the spring of 1942, the then newly formed Anders Army had left the Soviet Union for Iran. They were accompanied by thousands of Polish civilians who had been deported to the Soviet Union after the Soviets had invaded eastern Poland. On the 8th of April in Hamadan, Iran, some of the Polish soldiers ran into a young Iranian boy who had found a bear cub whose mother had been shot by hunters. One of the refugees took it upon themselves to take the cub in. She had prompted one of the lieutenants to buy the young bear, who spent the next 3 months in a Polish refugee camp. In August, the bear had been donated to the 2nd Transport Company, which later became the 22nd Artillery Supply Company. And from then on, he would be given the name Wojtek by the soldiers. There are some photos here and there of Wojtek play wrestling Polish soldiers, and it's the cutest shit ever to come out of such a horrific time in our history. From Egypt, the Polish II Corps were reassigned to fight alongside the British Army in the liberation of Italy, or the Italian campaign. Sadly, the regulations for the British transport ship disallowed pet animals, or get this, mascots. So to bypass this, they had Wojtek officially drafted into the Polish Army as a private, enlisted among the soldiers of the 22nd Artillery Supply Company. You see, he had his own paybook, rank, and serial number, and he lived with other men in tents, which is kind of gay, or in a special wooden crate, which was transported by truck. Wojtek wasn't just a mascot, he was a soldier now, and he would help his unit by carrying 100-pound crates of 25-pound artillery shells, never dropping a single one, because he was a good boy. Well, according to a British soldier, he recounts that the bear was really just mimicking the soldiers, which is still cute. I'm sorry, I love bears, and this is such a wholesome story no matter what points are true or not. Fuck that one British soldier for trying to out Wojtek as just kind of bullying the soldiers or mimicking them. I know deep down, he just wanted to help. Sadly, after the war, Wojtek would be handed over to the Edinburgh Zoo, where he would spend the rest of his life, often visited by journalists and former Polish soldiers, some of which would toss him cigarette butts for him to eat, as he did during his time in the army. He would still happily respond to Polish speakers, recognizing many faces from his former unit. Wojtek would sadly pass away in December of 1963 at the age of 21. Monuments of Wojtek would be erected in Poland in many places, some of which being Krakow and Warsaw. I don't know how I pronounced those, and I probably got them wrong. See, just a wholesome story about a bear who was raised by some soldiers. What a great way to start this iceberg. Sadly, this will be one of the few times you will be granted such peacefulness. I'll try to keep this short and simple because there's not much to go off here. I really hate these open-ended and somewhat vague ones, but whatever. As I already stated once, and as many people know, Poland had no shortage of getting its shit rocked for seemingly no real reason. And I'm not just talking about World War II. Poland has been invaded so many times throughout history that I'm low-key kind of surprised that they haven't had one yet by the Russians. But November is right around the corner. During one of these well-known invasions, the invasion of Poland of 1939, the Soviet Union and the Nationalist Socialist Party of Germany, aka the Nazis, would also loot Polish cultural artifacts and industrial infrastructure. We'll explain that last one in a bit, or maybe not. For now, let us talk about how many things in total were taken during this invasion. Over 516,000 individual items were taken. The exact number is uncertain, but that is still a pretty fucking huge number. 11,000 paintings by Polish painters, 2,800 paintings by other European painters, 1,400 sculptures. That's a lot of fucking sculptures. How? Just how did they manage that? 75,000 manuscripts, 25,000 maps, 22,000 books printed before the year 1800, and 300,000 prints and works on paper. Hundreds of thousands of other items of artistic and historical value. The number of looted or destroyed books is estimated to range anywhere from as low as 1.5 million to as high as 15 or 22 million. Even some exotic animals were taken from the Polish zoos. Oh, and this was just from what the Nazis did. Efforts to locate and reclaim all the looted art and national treasures has been, well, obviously it's been going on for years, and at this point, they haven't given up. But they're so desperate that they're planning on building a virtual museum to expose the items of lost art. Sorry, Poland, but I don't think you will ever see any of the looted art again. And especially anything that the Russians have. Real quick, because it made me laugh, I want to tell you what Wikipedia stated on this. Recovering looted art from the former states of the Soviet Union, such as Russia, is proving particularly difficult. Yeah, you don't fucking say. Lauri Torni, I think that's how you would pronounce his name, later known by Lauri Thorn, was a Finnish-born soldier who fought under the Finnish army, fought as a Waffen-SS captain under the alias Larry Lane of the Finnish Volunteer Battalion of the Waffen-SS, and fought as a United States Army major under the aforementioned alias Larry Thorn. Yeah, this man wasn't just under one flag, he was under 3 separate flags: the Finnish, the Germans, and the US. During the battles at Lake Ladoga, Lauri would take part in the destruction of the encircled Soviet divisions in Lameti. During these engagements, his commanders noticed his performance and assigned him to officer training, where he would be commissioned a second lieutenant position in the reserves. After the Winter War in 1941, he would go to Vienna, Austria, and train with the Waffen-SS, then return to Finland as a Finnish officer. The Germans recognized him as They recognized him as a second lieutenant. This motherfucker was being granted a pretty high officer ranking in 2 different flags within such a short amount of time. Why not shoot for a third? Well, in 1949, he would travel to Sweden, crossing the border from Tornio to Haparanda. Haparanda? I don't know, I'm trying my best here, where many inhabitants are ethnic Finns. From there, he would travel to Stockholm, where he stayed with Baroness von Eisen, who harbored many fugitive Finnish officers following the war. And while in Sweden, Torni would fall in love with a Swedish Finn named Marja Kolp. I don't know, I'm trying. And was quickly engaged to be married. I swear, what is it with people in the military or army or whatever getting married to people that they know for like a week or so? It's because they know they're gonna die. Is that it? That's probably it. And it's sad because the amount of army wives that cheat. Torni would be hired onto a Swedish cargo ship where he traveled to the United States in 1950. While in the Gulf of Mexico, he would jump overboard and swim to shore. Now, he was a refugee, and he would travel to New York City. Let me put a map up for you, just showing you where that is. So you see, here's the Gulf of Mexico, right here, and here is New York City. Anyway, in New York City, he would work as a carpenter and a cleaner until 1953. He enlisted into the US Army in 1954, and would later on fight in the Vietnam War, where he would lose his life. You have to give this man credit for the amount of military awards that he was getting from not only the United States, but the Finnish army and even the Nazi army. The dude could have been a successful spy, if I'm being 100% honest with you. If you want a more in-depth story about this guy, there's a video that I might link in the description to a simple history video about the guy, but I don't have much time to go over it in this video. So, you know, unless I want to have a 2-hour long video, I tire of these fucking names. John Heinrich Detlef Rabe was a Nazi party member and a German businessman who had actually tried to stop the war crimes during the Japanese Nanjing massacre, which we had actually covered in our first video. I might be wrong, it might have been our second one. Sorry. I won't go back over the Nanking massacre, but I will at least tell you what Rabe had to say about it and what he did during it. The Japanese army advanced on Nanjing on the 22nd of November 1937, and Rabe, along with other foreign nationals, organized the International Committee for the Nanking Safety Zone and created the Nanking Safety Zone to provide Chinese refugees with food and shelter from the impending Japanese massacre. He would later state the following: "There is a question of morality here. I cannot bring myself for now to betray the trust that these people have put in me, and it is touching to see how they believe in me." According to John, the massacre resulted in 50,000 to 60,000 deaths, and that his zone tried frantically to stop the atrocities. Today, we estimate that the death toll of Nanking massacre is as high as 300,000 civilians. Despite the mayor of Nanking ordering all Chinese citizens to move into safety zones, only 250,000 Chinese civilians would have their lives saved, which is still a really good number. As many of you know, following the defeat of the Axis powers, there were trials held called the Nuremberg Trials to try the Nazis and the collaborators for their war crimes. One of the worst offenders of this, other than Adolf Hitler himself, who took his own life, was Alois Brunner, who was responsible for the death and captures of well over hundreds of thousands of Jewish citizens from not just Germany, but Austria, Greece, Macedonia, France, and Slovakia. He would send them to the ghettos and concentration camps, and at the start of the war, he oversaw the deportation of well over 47,000 Austrian Jews to camps. All in all, this dude was a horrible person, and because of this, he'd become the most wanted Nazi after the war and during the hunt for all fleeing Nazis. He had evaded the capture by the Allied forces after World War II and allowed someone else to be executed in his name, as the Allies would mix up someone named Anton Brunner with Alois Brunner and executed him instead. He would flee West Germany in 1954 to Rome and then to Egypt, where he would work as a weapons dealer, and then he would go on to live in Syria, where he would go under the pseudonym of Dr. George Fischer. Whatever. Brunner would actually have a few assassination attempts made on his life during 1961 and 1980. Letter bombs would be sent to him while he was in Syria, and he would actually end up losing an eye and some fingers on his left hand, but never his life, sadly. On the 30th of November 2014, it would be reported that Brunner had actually died in Syria sometime in 2010, at the age of 97 or 98 years old. Brunner had managed to escape the fate of his war crimes that he committed and lived out a long life in Syria. Personally, I wish at least one of those letter bombs had actually gotten the job done. Germans in Tibet. I'm gonna try to keep this one as short as possible, as we have a lot of topics to cover in this video, and I realized that I don't want to make this video well over 2 hours. Germans had believed that they could trace the Aryan race back to Tibet. So during 1938 and 1939, they would set out on an expedition to prove it. They wanted to discover the source of the origin of the Aryan race and believed that they had entered India from the north some 1500 years earlier, and that the Aryans had committed the crime of mixing with local un-Aryan people. Yes, remember, Adolf Hitler believed that you should never mix races and believed that it would be a crime punishable of death to dare mix your pure Aryan blood with anyone who's not of Aryan blood. I don't really want to get into the whole findings of theirs, as some of it is actually quite disturbing, but For the sake of the topic, I will describe what it is Wikipedia states as their findings. Schaefer, one of the head researchers of the expedition, had a plethora of notes on the religious and cultural customs, from the various colorful Buddhist festivals to Tibetan attitudes towards marriage, rape, menstruation, childbirth, homosexuality, and masturbation. He had mentioned how Tibetan homosexuality plays a massive role for the Tibetans, as he describes the various positions taken by older lamas with younger boys, and then went on to explain how homosexuality played an important role in the higher politics of Tibet. All in all, I don't think they found what they were looking for and later returned home. There is so much I didn't cover here, and I would really advise if you're just that much curious on it, you should go and look it up yourself. I know that the point of these is supposed to be that I sit here and I explain them in autistic detail. However, this is one that I would much rather not talk about, as I have already kind of said the worst. Chichi incident. The 41st US President, George Herbert Walker Bush, also served as a pilot during World War II. He had survived being shot down over the Pacific during an American air raid on the Japanese-controlled island of Jima in September of 1944. And that's not our entire story, by the way. You see, Jima would be much more than it would possibly look. 9 airmen had survived the air raid, Bush being the only one who had avoided capture, as he had bailed out of his plane early and escaped the island of Jima. However, the 8 other airmen would suffer an experience that not a single person could be prepared for. Most prisoners would face torture and execution, while some would be cannibalized as part of meals that the Japanese officers would put on. According to sources, Major Sueo Matoba, a tried, would have prisoners' flesh prepared for a feast and a party in his quarters. Some captains would host similar feasts of their own. 4 American airmen were executed for the sole purpose of having their flesh consumed, being removed from their thighs and their livers to be served as delicacies. 11 of the offending officers would be found guilty of murder and prevention of an honorable burial. However, they weren't even found guilty of cannibalism. The Lake Toplitz treasure refers to a legend surrounding Lake Toplitz, or Toplitz, I'm not entirely sure, an isolated lake that is located in the heart of the lush forest in the Alps. According to legend, the Nazis had actually dumped billions of dollars worth of stolen gold. According to history, it was somewhere in the area of $5.6 billion. Apparently, investigators had actually retrieved 700 million pound or $899 million US of counterfeit notes that Hitler planned to use to sabotage Britain's economy from the same lake. But as far as valuables go, they haven't really found anything yet. And I'm sure nobody's ever going to attempt to find anything more than what they've already found down there. The Amelia Earhart spy theory it's quite interesting. So let's go over this. There's a theory that instead of dying on a remote island and being eaten alive by coconut crabs, not eaten, devoured by them, that Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan were actually captured by the Japanese after landing on the then Japanese-controlled Marshall Islands, and that they were thought to be US spies. So the Japanese killed them, and that's what the theory says. They say that that's a pretty outlandish theory because she'd likely crash in the ocean. And I mean, a plane being lost to the sea is, it's like that saying about finding a needle in a haystack, but somehow way more impossible. Like, it's possible, but it's also not possible. You know what I mean? I would much rather that somehow she was captured and tortured and killed than being devoured alive by fucking coconut crabs. But I'm pretty sure she crashed into the Pacific Ocean. Paul Ogorzow, better known as the S-Bahn murderer, is a Nazi murderer. Or he is part of the Nazi party and he murdered people. Anyways, Ogorzow renewed his series of attacks in October 1940, focusing primarily on the 9-kilometer stretch of the S-Bahn. He would lurk aboard empty carriages in the train yard, waiting for victims to pass the train's passenger cars, which were pitch black due to the blackout of Berlin, and he would rely heavily on the fact that the lone female passengers weren't suspicious of a uniformed guard, or uniformed employee approaching them. He would ask for their ticket, and once they were distracted, he would strangle them and strike them on the head with a 2-inch thick piece of lead-encased telephone cable. I don't know. It's a very interesting topic, but we're talking about the fucking Nazis here. You know, the same people who definitely did things that were far worse. Like I totally didn't already mention the gassing of millions of Jewish citizens or anything. I don't know. The Demon Corps. Okay, so I will talk about this from memory as best as I can because I don't know. I love this topic so much that I can't explain to you why I do, but I can tell you that I do. If anyone goes as far as to ever say that I don't put any effort into my videos, I want you, and maybe even myself, to share the following with them, because it might prove otherwise. I have to put my fucking mic down here. This is not the Demon Corps. Actually, this is the Demon Corps. That little thing right there. So I decided that it would be really fun to do an experiment where I show you exactly what it was that happened, because a diagram's just not enough. See, these two are beryllium half-spheres, or hemispheres, and they were used in order to protect the Demon Core there, which is a plutonium orb, or I guess a plutonium sphere, from reaching criticality. Well, they were doing criticality. Oh shit! Pretty much what they were doing was they would... Well, what Louis Slotin was doing was he would get a flathead screwdriver and he would just barely open up the two beryllium half-spheres in order to just lift it a very little bit and see, you know, the criticality point. How long it would take to get... How to get... They were testing the criticality point of the Demon Core, pretty much. And he would just come in here, he would get a flathead screwdriver, and he would do this. Sometimes he would even put little beryllium cubes right between the two to get a good look at it. Oftentimes he would have to... There's supposed to be a hole at the top. I'm not going to do that because, as you can see, these are just... these aren't made for that. But, you know, I'm trying my best with what I've got, okay? Anyways, yeah. So one day, he just decided, all right, it'd be a really great idea if I just did this, and then, oops, he slipped, and it fell, and it reached super criticality point, and a blue light emanated from it, filling the entire room. Him, and as well as, I believe, 10 or 11 other scientists that were in the room at the time, scientists or physicists in the room at the time, all got hit with an immense amount of radiation. And because of the immense amount of radiation, Louis told everybody to stay exactly where they were standing when the Demon Core had reached super criticality. And what he would do is he would place a piece of duct tape, as far as I remember, right exactly where they were standing. He would measure it from where the Demon Core was, and he would tell them exactly how much time they had left on Earth. Because you see, when the Demon Core reached super criticality, it let out a lot of radiation. An immense amount, so much so that it could halve the lives of those who were even close to it. Louis Slotin himself only living, I believe, 2 or 3 years after. Anything that I got wrong in this, I will correct in the video when I'm editing it. But that is essentially the Demon Core. And if anybody, like I said, if anybody ever says that I don't put any fucking effort into my videos, I want you to show them this. I also just said that story completely from memory, and I've researched this for quite a while, but I don't exactly remember it, so bear with me there. I probably did get a lot wrong, and I would like to come back and correct it if I could, or correct it in the comments, but nobody ever reads the comments. Anyways, that was the Demon Core. If you've ever seen the famous photograph of all the people saluting Hitler, and there's just that one dude in the middle, he just kind of got his arms crossed looking up at the camera, very obviously not into it and does not support Hitler. Well, that one person is August Landmesser, an absolute badass. I swear, he was the kid who would refuse to stand during the Pledge of Allegiance, but he's way cooler and actually doing something that's right and not just trying to be an edgy teenager. Sadly, Landmesser was killed in action in 1944, but he wasn't executed, so that's good. The Columbus Globe for state and industry leaders was a unique globe that was designed for Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party. It's a huge globe that was found in Hitler's office in many pictures, and just suddenly it vanished following his death and the raid of his bunker. Kind of curious, right? From December of 1944 to March of 1974, Hiroo Onoda would hold out on the island of Lubang after refusing to surrender following the end of World War II. He only surrendered in 1974 after relieved of duty by his former commanding officer, who was flown to Lubang to relieve Onoda. After 3 decades, he had killed upwards of 30 Filipino civilians in Lubang during and after World War II. Him and his companions would carry out guerrilla activities and engaged in several shootouts with local police. When they had received word from leaflets that Japan had surrendered and that the war ended on the 15th of August, they would distrust them, ignore them, and continue their fight against the people of Lubang. Lubang, I don't know. Onoda, despite all of what honestly are just atrocities, if you ask me, was very popular on his return to Japan, with some even urging him to run for Japan's Diet. This man honestly thought that the war was going on for another 30 years and just kept killing people for it. Like, I don't know, that shit's kind of fucked if you ask me. The Fugol balloon bomb was a hydrogen-filled paper balloon that had a payload of 4 11-pound incendiary devices and 1 33-pound high-explosive anti-personnel bomb. They were completely uncontrolled balloons that were carried over the Pacific Ocean from Japan to North America by fast, high-altitude wind currents, or jet streams. Japan had actually launched 9,300 balloons from sites on coastal Honshu, and only 300 were found or observed by the US, Canada, and Mexico. The bombs that the balloons carried were ineffective as fire starters thanks to the damp weather. The US media would launch a censorship campaign, which wasn't the first and definitely not the last, in order to prevent the Japanese Imperial Army from finding out that one of their balloon bombs was in fact effective. On May 5th of 1945, 6 civilians were killed by one of the balloon bombs in Oregon. But it was one of the war's only fatalities in the continental US. God, just imagine how cool it would be if we had some shit like Modern Warfare 2 happened here in our own country. The 3,000 lost Chinese soldiers. In December of 1937, the battalion of 3,000 Chinese soldiers was assigned to a 2-mile stretch of land around Nanjing. The Japanese had taken over the city, and the soldiers were charged with preventing the enemy fighters from getting out of it. They were tasked with taking back and defending a bridge in Yangtze River. Tried my best. However, on the evening of December 9th, 1937, the battalion commander would be awoken by the disturbing news that the defensive line was not responding to any signals or any calls whatsoever. When a team was sent to investigate the silence, they'd found it was completely abandoned. There were no signs of a battle. No signs of a struggle. The heavy weapons setup were still in place and ready to be fired. They still had concealed fires that were still burning. Everyone just simply vanished. Those who had remained were questioned about the other thousands that had gone missing, but those at the bridge had all stated that they hadn't seen any movement from across the bridge. Other soldiers would go on to state that there were no sounds of any combat at night, and they had 0 leads. It was theorized that maybe the soldiers just gave up, surrendered to the Japanese. However, the Nanjing soldiers who were stationed at the bridge said that they didn't see anything. Some people even just said that the disappearance never even happened. Whatever the case, it's very strange for nearly 3,000 soldiers to just completely vanish into thin air without any explanation or reasoning. Unless they just never existed to begin with. But that would be a strange thing to fabricate, right? Initially, when dropping the bombs on Japan, we weren't going to actually drop a second bomb on Nagasaki. We were going to drop a second bomb, but it wasn't going to be on Nagasaki. When we had arrived at our original target, Kokura, the boxcar would find that it was obscured entirely by clouds, and due to the bad weather, they would instead head towards their second location of Nagasaki. Originally, Kokura was picked as it was where the Japanese Imperial Army's massive arsenal was located. Those in Japan refer to the fact that Kokura had bad weather that prevented it from being nuked as the luck of Kokura, as it saved the lives of tens of thousands of people. The Direlewanger Brigade, and I'm trying my best here with German, also known as the 36th Waffen-Grenadier Division of the SS, again trying, or even the Black Hunters, was a unit of the Waffen-SS during World War II. It consisted of convicted war criminals who were not expected to survive their service with the unit. The unit participated in the mass murder of civilians and in other war crimes in German-occupied Eastern Europe. In Poland, they would massacre more than 40,000 Polish civilians. They massacred 30,000 civilians in Bielorussia, which is now Belarus, so, whatever. By 1943, the unit would consist of 259 men. And in 1944, they would return to Poland, where they would participate in the Warsaw Uprising in Poland, and what would become the Wola Massacre. They would massacre up to 40,000 civilians in less than 2 weeks, as well as massacring hundreds of Polish children. One person described that they found 350 to 500 children that were slaughtered. He would describe blood streaming downstairs, and how they would have to walk over bodies, and how the unit would break in their little heads with the butt ends of their weapons. The leader of the unit, Direlewanger himself, was captured by French forces in Germany and died in their custody, being beaten to death by Polish soldiers. As he fucking deserves. Escape from Sobibor. Sobibor was one of many extermination camps located in Poland. It was said that somewhere between 170,000 to 250,000 people were murdered in Sobibor. On October 14th of 1943, 600 of the imprisoned Jews would become a small part of the largest prisoner escape of World War II. In an act of bravery, a small resistance group in Sobibor planned and executed a revolt that would provide the camp's prisoners with a chance to escape. 300 prisoners managed to flee the camp, 50 of which would survive through to the end of World War II. There's a movie about it that's titled Escape from Sobibor, and it's really interesting, and I would absolutely recommend that you give it a watch. I don't really want this video to be too long, so I'm not really going over everything in a long manner like I would like to, and I'm sorry. Bletchley Park. I don't really know why this one is on here, but you remember when I covered the Enigma code in part 2 of this iceberg? Well, during World War II, the Bletchley Park estate had housed the Government Code and Cipher School, which regularly penetrated the secret communications of the Axis powers. Like the Enigma and the Lorenz ciphers, not a big deal. The GC&CS team codebreakers were Gordon Welchman, Hugh Alexander, Bill Tute, Stuart Milner Barry, and most importantly, Alan Turing. Bletchley Park was actually kept completely secret for many years after the war. By the way, the mansion is located in the United Kingdom, all the fucking Brits. Fucking English. So this is exactly where my pronunciation is going to go real fucking shit and right down the drain. Carpatho-Ukraine is an interesting one to me, as it is the shortest lived state in history. It really only existed for 24 hours. Declaring its independence from Czechoslovakia on March 15th of 1939, it was formally annexed by Hungary 1 day later. In 1938, the Nazis would annex the Sudetenland parts in the west of the country, thus weakening the integrity of the Czechoslovakia state. Transcarpathia and Slovakia demanded and got more autonomy. The region named itself Carpathian Ruthenia, and in November of 1938 changed into Carpatho-Ukraine. Within the same month, the southern part was annexed by Hungary, an ally of Nazi Germany. This didn't calm Czechoslovak-Hungarian tensions. Between November 2nd of 1938 and January 12th of 1939, 22 border clashes would ensue. This would encourage the separatism in the Slovak and Ruthenian east of Czechoslovakia. As they were not satisfied with autonomy alone, and encouraged by none other than the Nazis, the Slovaks would declare independence. The very next day, Hitler and his troops marched into Bohemia and Moravia. This left Carpatho-Ukraine no other option than declare its very own independence. This occurred on the 15th of March. Funnily enough, they even had a president, which would be their only one. the independence of the state immediately plunged it into complete and utter chaos and anarchy. Troops would stage terrorist attacks against the remnants of the Czech army, as well as against pro-Slovak and pro-Hungarian citizens. The further skirmishes provided a sufficient cause for Hungary to invade the same region as Carpatho-Ukraine. This happened on the exact same day as the declaration of independence for them. And within a day, Hungary had annexed the whole territory, and on March 17th, the Hungarian troops reached the Polish border. The last of the resistance was broken the very next day. As quickly as it had received independence, it had ceased to exist. Operation Tannenbaum. So this was pretty much just an operation that was planned by the Nazis to invade Liechtenstein and Sweden, but they never did it, and they just kind of canceled it. So it's not that big of a deal, but it's still kind of interesting nonetheless. Just not going to go over it in huge detail because it doesn't really matter. Comfort women. Yeah, I don't think I really need to explain this one much, but I guess I'll try. First, I want to reiterate the content warning found in the beginning of this video. This one deals with sexual abuse and many more things. Comfort women, or comfort girls, were women and girls that were forced into sexual slavery by the Imperial Japanese Army during World War II. I don't know why I always have to add that it was during World War II. I mean, let's be honest, I don't think I need to because this is the World War II iceberg. But just in case you forgot that it was World War II, I guess I'll add it each time because that's what's brought up in the article. Anyways, comfort women were established to help increase the morale of Japanese soldiers and somehow reduce the random sexual assaults of women by soldiers. Yeah, I mean, they were fucking forced sex slaves. So, I mean, is it really solving your problem, or is it making it somehow so much fucking worse as it's enforced by the Japanese military? The Japanese troops would force upwards of hundreds of thousands of women from Korea, the Philippines, Vietnam, China, and many other countries into brothels where they were sexually enslaved and repeatedly raped. Many women would either die from the assault of these soldiers or would just take their own lives for obvious reasons. The estimated amount of women who were involved ranges anywhere from as low as 50,000 to as high as 200,000 women. Japan acknowledged the existence of the comfort women following the end of the war, but never fully apologized for it, and it would go on to damage the reputation of Japan in Asia for decades following. You see, all these figures that are right behind me, and you see the fact that I love Japan. Yeah, it's not a magical place, and it's full of some heinous shit that people will look over because of cute anime women. And I hate America. Just know that it has a horrible fucked up past. And someone mentioned in my comment section that I should do extensive research into Japan because clearly I don't know how fucked up they are. I do. I'm fully fucking aware. I just don't fucking care. Aktion T4 or Aktion T4. The end of these tiers usually deal with some of the worst shit. And this isn't even the end, but we're getting there. Aktion T4 was a mass murder campaign of involuntary euthanasia in Nazi Germany. A number of planners would organize a secret killing operation where they would specifically target disabled children. They were led by the director of Hitler's private chancellery and Hitler's attending physician. They believed that those with disabilities were unworthy of life, and they deserved to have it taken away from them by any means necessary. Public health authorities began to encourage parents of children with disabilities to admit their young children to one of a number of specially designated pediatric clinics throughout Germany and Austria. However, behind the backs of these parents, they would be mercilessly killing these said children. They would give the young children lethal overdoses of medication, or oftentimes would lead them to die by starvation. The estimates state that at least 10,000 physically and mentally challenged German children perished at the hands of these monstrous Nazi doctors. According to T4's own internal calculations, the euthanasia effort had claimed the lives of 70,273 institutionalized mentally and physically disabled people at the 6 gassing facilities between 1940 and 1941. All right, here's a little bit of a fun one. The unfinished portrait of FDR. FDR, or Franklin D. Roosevelt, had a watercolor portrait of him painted by Elizabeth Shomatoff. Yeah, that's her last name, folks. Shomatoff. Anyways, she was commissioned to paint a portrait of the U.S. President Roosevelt and started her work on April 12th of 1945. However, as you might not know, or you might know about FDR, he would end up passing away from a stroke later that day, while he was still in office, to which he would be quickly replaced by Harry Bonham Hardman Truman. And that's why the portrait was never finished. Axis Sally. Mildred Elizabeth Sisk was a Nazi propagandist in the 1940s. She would obtain work as an announcer with the Reichsrundfunk, the fucking RRG, or the German state radio. I hate these. By 1941, the US was advising the American nationals to leave Germany and German-controlled territories. However, Gillers chose to remain because her fiance at the time was a German citizen, and he said he would never marry her if she were to return to the United States. Yeah, the dude ended up dying on the Eastern Front anyways, leaving her completely trapped in Germany. Well, fucking sucks, I guess. At the very beginning of her radio broadcast, she would remain entirely apolitical. Eventually, she would start a new relationship with a German-American program director in the USA zone at the RRG. Gillers was known for expressing anti-Semitic sentiments during her broadcasts, and even stated during one of them, "I say damn Roosevelt and Churchill and all of their Jews who have made this war possible." Her most famous broadcast would come a few weeks prior to the D-Day invasion of Normandy, in which she would perform a radio play called The Vision of Invasion. She plays an Ohio mother named Evelyn who dreams that her son has died in a horrific death on a ship in the English Channel during an attempted invasion of occupied Europe. Kind of fucking eerie. Well, after this, her broadcasts would become completely lackluster and repetitive to many viewers, as the creative mind behind it, Max Otto Koischwitz, her husband that I had kind of forgotten to mention, the one that came after the one that passed, he also passed. She would then spend 30 years in prison under charges of treason. Fuck that bitch. Cargo cults. Cargo cults is a belief system in which a group of people in an indigenous society imitate the behaviors, rituals, and symbols associated with the advanced technology of other societies. Cargo cults date back as far as 1885, but during World War II, the Melanesian islanders would be provided with airdrops of manufactured clothing, canned food, tents, weapons, and other goods that were mostly meant for the soldiers. However, the soldiers would share it with the islanders. It would cause absolutely drastic changes to the lifestyle of the islanders, many of whom had never seen the outside world whatsoever. The John Frum cult, one of the most widely reported and longest-lived cults, stayed before the war and became a cargo cult after the war. Many members worshipped certain Americans, having the names John Frum or Tom Navy, who they claimed had brought them cargo to their island. And I'm gonna skip this one because it's simply that Japan and Russia have kind of always been at war since 1917 to even kind of right now, but it's not that big of a deal. Helmuth Hubener. This one's a bit of a sad one. Helmuth Hubener was a German youth who was executed at the young age of 17 by the Nazis. After finishing middle school in 1941, he would start an apprenticeship at the Hamburg Social Authority, and he would be recruited into a resistance movement and meet new friends who would start him on listening to enemy broadcasts. Listening to foreign media, he would use what he heard to compose various anti-national socialist texts and anti-war leaflets, and he'd make many copies of said leaflets. They were meant to bring the people of Germany's attention to how skewed the official reports about World War II from Berlin were, as well as he would point out Hitler and Goebbels' criminal behavior. Obviously, in Nazi Germany, this kind of thing was not acceptable, and by 1942, he was arrested by the Gestapo at his workplace, tried as an adult, and was executed by guillotine, all at the age of 17. After his sentence was read out to him, he would face judges and say, "Now I must die, even though I have committed no crime. So, now it's my turn, but your turn will come." What a fucking badass. He went out simply just trying to open the eyes of the Germans, who were being brainwashed by the Nazis to believe that they were the good guys in the war. I mean, they weren't really being brainwashed. I'm pretty sure a lot of them fucking knew they were not the good guys. And the people who weren't allowed to have free thought, he wanted to free their thoughts. He wanted the truth to get out there at the age of 17 and was executed in an awful way for it. And just like that, that concludes the World War II Mysteries and Obscurities Iceberg Tier 3. Now, I know it took me a year to put this out. And you're probably wondering, well, if it took you a year to put it out, are you going to take another year to put out Tier 4? And the answer is no. No, I'm not going to take that long to put out Tier 4. I promise you. I don't have nearly as much free time anymore as I used to. And I mean, like I used to have so much free time. I could genuinely sit down and make these videos, and I could do it all like that, all within my week. But I don't have that much free time anymore. I'm working a 40-hour week job, and I'm not able to do it as much as I would like to. And as depressing as that is, that's life. Until this YouTube takes off, which I doubt it ever will. I'm just doing these for fun now. And look, I appreciate all of you who do actually watch this, and I will appreciate anyone who actually watches this iceberg video. I put a lot of research into a lot of these. Sometimes I just copy off of Wikipedia articles, but beforehand, it was really just me memorizing it as best as I could. Thing is, I love these topics. I love talking about them. I love doing icebergs, and I want to do more of them, and I want to do more like long form videos. And I want to try to be as entertaining as possible. I love making videos. I really do. And I love you guys. Those of you who actually watch my stuff. Anyways, thank you so much if you stuck around for this long. I will catch you in the next one.